Now we turn to organ harvesting in China. The Chinese regime is known to have been removing organs from non-consenting healthy people for decades, then selling them to international patients seeking transplants. But the crime has been largely ignored for decades. Now, at the World Summit on Combating and Preventing Forced Organ Harvesting, politicians and leaders from around the globe are calling for action. NTD's Penny Zhou reports.
When I was educated on this issue and what was happening, it took my core and it shook it. Forced organ harvesting is truly a monstrous practice that is difficult to conceive, even exists, until it is brought before you. The idea that there are those that take someone's life and treat them like parts for pay or favors still leaves me horrified.
Dozens of political leaders and experts from 19 countries are gathering virtually to raise awareness of China's continued practice of forced organ harvesting. That's a state-sponsored campaign to kill prisoners of conscience to supply organs for China's transplant market.
Organ donation is a precious act of saving a life. But forced organ harvesting is commercialized murder and without doubt amongst the worst of crimes.
French Senator André Gattelon explained that some politicians have chosen to be silent because of threats from the Chinese regime.
When one questions the forced removal of organs in China, one quickly runs the risk of being labeled heavily anti-communist or anti-Chinese. And sometimes even risk the threat of commercial or political retaliation from Beijing. Hence the appalling diplomacy of silence, which is far from confined to France.
China is one of the top destinations for transplant tourism, meaning people from all over the world go to China to get a transplant. That's because Chinese hospitals offer very short wait times. Beijing claims that their organs come from voluntary donors. But a London-based People's Tribunal in 2019 called the regime out for lying. It concluded that the practice of forced organ harvesting was happening on a significant scale in China, with Falun Gong practitioners being the main source of organs. The spiritual practice has been persecuted by the Chinese regime since 1999. Song Kim, a judge from the Seoul Administrative Court in South Korea, argues that global organizations like the United Nations may not be of much help in this case. That's because the Chinese regime itself is a member of the UN Human Rights Council.
It might take another 20 years for UN to take effective actions against the crime.
She suggested that instead, individual countries use autonomous sanctions under what's called the Global Magnitsky Act. The U.S. has used it to punish Chinese officials responsible for abuses in Xinjiang. That's by freezing their assets and banning perpetrators from entering the United States. Kim says the same approach can be used to target facilitators of forced organ harvesting. Penny Zhou, NTD News.